guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Crazy Neighbor Set My House on Fire Because I Did Not Trim My Grass. Me and my neighbor have never seen eye to eye exactly. We had the normal disputes about trash bins and things like that. The one thing this guy had a major problem with was my lawn. At least once a week he would show up on my property just to yell at me and tell me that I needed to cut my lawn because of how ugly and overgrown it was. Now this guy was what some people might call lawn obsessed, to where he tended to it meticulously and wanted it to be perfect. I on the other hand didn't really care about my lawn that much and only cut it when it really was getting too long. Being a single father of a young kid makes it hard for me to focus on unimportant things. Still, without fail, once again he would show up to my house and we would have another conversation and argument about my lawn. Neighbor, I told you to cut your lawn. It looks disgusting. Me, I told you before to leave me alone about my damn lawn. It's my property and I can cut it how I like and when I like. Neighbor, you are making the whole neighborhood look bad. Just let me come over and cut the grass myself the right way. Me, if you come anywhere near my property with a mower, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Leave me and my property alone. Neighbor, we will see about that. I'll be back, cut your grass. Then he would usually leave as the other neighbors came to see and watch the screaming match. One day though things were a little bit different, and he got so worked up after I told him that I might just never cut my grass again if he didn't stop that he ended up slapping me right across the face. I went right into my house and called the police. I didn't want to have him arrested, just scare him enough to maybe leave me alone finally. The police arrived and I explained the situation to them. When they asked if I wanted to press charges against neighbor, I told them no. The officer went and spoke to neighbor anyway to warn him, and I don't really know what went on with their conversation. I honestly thought that maybe that would be enough to calm him down and keep him away. It turns out that my calling the cops had gotten him extremely angry, and after they left, he was going to try and teach me a lesson. He came back later and yelled at me again about calling the cops over nothing and telling me that with his past record he would probably end up going back to jail. I had no idea that neighbor was in jail before, and I later found out that he had been arrested for assault before. The final thing he said to me before going back to his house was that if I ever called the cops on him again that he would kill me. I'm not going to lie, that kind of scared me. At that point I didn't know what his past record had been for, and for all I knew he had killed before. Still, I wanted to just get on with my life and chose to ignore it instead of calling the cops back immediately and telling them what he had threatened. Looking back, I was kind of the idiot in the situation for not doing that and instead just waiting and pretending like everything would be fine now. So, I went back into my house and tried to just move on with the rest of my day like nothing had happened per usual with our fights. I was sitting in the living room playing with my daughter when a brick smashed through the window and ended up hitting me in the side. Glass shattered everywhere and I put my body over my daughter's to try and keep any glass from landing on her. That's when I noticed the strange smell and saw that the brick and window were covered in gasoline. I wasn't quick enough to put two and two together. A minute later my house was on fire, and I don't remember much of anything besides hightailing it outside with my daughter in my arms. I could see the fire and I didn't have my phone, so ran across the street and asked them to call 911. I did notice however neighbor hightailing it out of there with his car. That plus another neighbor's witness had it be clear as day that neighbor tried to set my house on fire with me and my daughter in it as some kind of revenge for me calling the cops on him. By the time the fire was put out, the inside of my house was basically ruined. It would take months to fix the damages and more money than I had. Luckily my mother lived fairly close by and allowed me and daughter to stay there for as long as we needed. As for neighbor, he hadn't returned home and was now officially on the run. It took only about a day before neighbor apparently gave up and turned himself in to the police. He knew there was no way he was going to get away with it, so he actually pled guilty on all charges. In exchange they took away his charge for attempted murder and instead only charged him with arson, aggravated assault, and death threats that he tried to carry out on. Plus, a bunch of minor charges like damage to public utilities that didn't seem as important to the judge. That plus his record basically assured that he would getting sent back to jail and I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. As far as the damages to my house went, he ended up having to pay about $70,000, of which I only saw about half, to fix my house. My insurance was covering most of the actual home repairs though, so his money ended up being used to replace furniture and other things that my insurance didn't. I'm mostly glad that my daughter seemed to be too young to really understand what happened, and as soon as she got to my mother's house started playing again like nothing had happened. I can't wait to put all of this behind me though. I didn't tell you the most ironic part of all of this story yet though. So, this neighbor that had been arrested for assault and been in jail before? He was actually considered one of the peacekeepers of the neighborhood and with everyone else was calm and pleasant, wanting to help them solve their problems and everyone to get along. It was like night and day compared to how he dealt with me, and to this day I have no idea why he chose me to start constant fights with, while with everyone else he appeared to be the nicest guy ever. Some things like that just will remain a mystery, I guess. The next story is titled, "Refuse to be a decent human? Lose your house." It's 2011, my boyfriend and I decided to rent a house with our best friends, an engaged couple with 2 kids. I'm changing names here. I'm Kylie, my boyfriend is Jim, and our couple friends are Brad and Angelina. Jim, Brad, and myself are active duty military. After over a month of searching we found a really cute house, 1,850 square feet, nice yard, great neighbors, only $13.50 per month, hardwood except for one room, 7 minutes from our base. The landlord is in a different state but tells us she pays one of the neighbors to manage the keys for her. It's a military town and that's not uncommon. We all met up with him, toured the house, decided to sign the lease. We moved in sometime in August. We liked the house, but there were crickets coming into one of the bedrooms through a crack in the windowsill. The landlord didn't want to fix it and said to caulk it. It worked, no problem. We noticed the carpet in the living room was a little dingy and asked her if she would mind paying someone to clean it since we moved in that way. We even made a note of it and took pictures when we moved in. She said no. I bought my own cleaner and the carpet lightened a few shades. In October, we went to cut the heat on, and it didn't work. So, we realized the oil tank was empty. Part of the lease states when we move out, we needed to leave a full tank of oil, which isn't really a problem as long as we start with a full tank and use all the oil in it. Call the landlord and ask her to have the oil company come fill the tank, which it's 2011 so it's going to cost $1,200 to do. She says no. We told her fine, we wouldn't be leaving a full tank when the lease was over though. She got mad and said we had to because it was a clause in our lease. We had the oil company provide statements to say the last time it was filled was that prior January and it was empty when they came to fill our tank that month. We filled the tank, but the heat still didn't work. It's been 2 weeks and it's really getting cold. We asked the LL to get a repairman out to the house. Brad and Angelina have 2 small kids that need to stay warm. My landlord took another week to fix the heat, and the people that did it were questionable. It worked for a month, but then quit. We called in our own repairmen to come handle it since the last ones creeped me out, and he noticed some major issues with the chimney that needed attention right away. Like it was unsafe to run the heat at all, the damn thing was about to collapse. We let her know, emailed scans of the paperwork from our nice Honeywell tech and 2 quotes from contractors to get the work done. It's going to be $3,000 to $3,500-ish. It's an emergency repair, at the point it's December and we are really cold. We were using space heaters. The kids have chest colds and Angelina is ready to fly into our landlord's state to handle her physically. I mailed all of that information to her, Angelina's bodily threats omitted, with a signature confirmation and a letter stating the issue. A few days pass and nothing from our witch LL. I got onto Google and read the Landlord-Tenant Act and local landlord court cases just to see if I had a leg to stand on. I also spoke to my JAG, whose brother happened to be a real estate lawyer, who was also friends with my next-door neighbor, the keyholder dude, who surprise, never got paid to watch the house, and decided to come over for dinner with all of us at their place. He gave me some really good info. The next morning, I called our landlord and told her, look, you get this repair done or I will condemn the house and not pay a dime of rent until it's done. She says she doesn't believe me. I overnighted a certified letter to her explaining the issue and requesting the repair be started within 5 business days since it was an emergency and I had already reported it a week prior. 5 days go by, nothing. At this point I'm ready to walk out on the lease but don't have quite enough legal issues to back that up, so Jim and I requested 20 days of vacation from the military. I drafted a letter to LL telling her she had 10 days to get the repair done or we would terminate the lease, and we would not be paying rent while the heat was in disrepair. I cited the previous letter and included her signature confirmation for it also. 4 days before we go on vacation, I overnighted and signature confirmation the letter. 2 days before we are set to go on vacation, I called a city building inspector, set an appointment, he came and condemned the house. It took him less than 15 minutes to decide. Brad and Angelina took off to Angelina's mom's house and Jim and I headed out to spend a few weeks in warm, sunny Florida with his Cuban family. We prorated rent for every day the house was condemned. I called the building inspector every few days to see if the work was done. He also demanded that my landlord do a few minor electrical repairs. Several days have gone by. I spent half that month's rent on good food, liquor, and Disney World tickets. On the 6th day in Florida, the landlord calls me threatening eviction. I told her to please take me to court because I was ready to embarrass her. I cited the Landlord-Tenant Act, told her I was going to sue for travel costs to Florida, hotel costs, and at that point she was already looking at $850 and it was just going to get more costly. Long shot, but I was mad. I also said we were prepared to just walk out if it wasn't done by the time the certified letter stated it should be. Again, I wasn't kidding. I had already reserved a U-Haul. Oh, and she would be reimbursing me for that $1,100 in oil I hadn't been able to burn. She said fine and finally replaced the chimney 2 weeks after the place was condemned. My neighbor told me she had to borrow money from her family to get it done. Not my problem. She also told me I was a horrible person who was torturing her and her 5-year-old who were victims of domestic violence. She also told me we were only slightly better than the last tenants, who she thought were black by how terrible the house looked when they left. Okay, wow, a slumlord and a racist, I should play the lottery. I'm sorry for your situation but your husband has been a shit to you since you got together. How do I know? Turns out, one of my supervisors is friends with her old supervisor and he and other members of her chain of command had responded to fights where her and her husband hit each other. Apparently, the husband is a drunk too. They tried to get her to leave him, but she is just as bad. She busted out his windshield one time and burned all his stuff another. Turns out she got a general administration discharge. She seemed so nice and sweet when we were getting ready to sign that lease. I still can't believe what a bucket of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs she turned out to be. Whatever, we came home to a house with functioning heat. Brad and Angelina decided not to move back in but that was all cool with Jim and me. We notarized an agreement between us and told them we totally understood and would take over the rent. Missed them after they left, though. Later on, in March, a realtor knocked on my door and said he wanted to show the house to a couple. I said, "You have the wrong place, buddy, I'm renting this right now." He's like, "No, the owner wants a short sale hopefully by July." I explained I had no notice and was a little confused, but it was okay. He was very uncomfortable and unhappy to have walked into a situation where a tenant didn't even know he was coming. I told him it was totally fine and went on to divulge some details about his new client. He was pretty appalled. He leveled with me, "It's a cute house but really only worth $90,000 due to the market crash." It had last sold for $124,000, according to Zuya. She's asking for $120K and on the verge of foreclosure. Seriously? I let the couple and realtor in the next day. Didn't worry about it after that. He came to take detailed pictures so he wouldn't have to bother me with flaky potential buyers. He was so nice, I let him help me find a new house to rent when my lease was up. We are still friends on Facebook. Then, in July the realtor called me and asked if he could show the house to a client. Absolutely. I cleaned and made sure I looked nice for her visit and when they got to my house, I noticed the lady was black. And she wanted to rent. I said, "Ma'am, call me later today and don't tell anyone." She did. I told her what my LL said about how she couldn't believe her past tenants were white because they left the house trashed when they left. I said, "I don't think this is a good house for you. I know a great guy who is renting out his beachside condo for the next year while he goes out to Africa. Why don't you call him?" I text his listing to her, she calls him, ends up renting his house. None of that is really revenge. Before we moved out, Jim and I cleaned the house. We left the carpet sparkling clean, had professionals come in and do it, paid a gardener to come in and make the yard spiffy, patched up some small nail holes and even painted some window trim that was chipped when we moved in. We basically left it better than we found it. We had already repainted 3 bedrooms in flattering colors when we first moved in. That was approved by the LL, no problem of course. We took pictures before and after we moved in. A month goes by, we are all settled in our new condo, and she didn't give us a dime back in freaking deposit. $2,400 down the damn drain, plus the cost of little repairs we made out of pocket so we couldn't have to deal with her crazy ass. I was angry. I began organizing to go to court. Then suddenly Jim is told he's deploying soon. A week goes by. Also, I'm pregnant, which we were casually not trying but trying to do. We were happy about that part, but I was puking every day, twice a day, and emotional. Then Angelina calls me, and guess who is on Craigslist slinging her shithole slum? My LL. I lost it. I got on the same forum her ad was on and posted about the house. Every single problem we had. Every phone call. Every snotty email. How many weeks we went without heat. The crickets. LL's messed up relationship with her off and on again husband. The oil tank, and the racist comments. I never said don't rent or buy, just shared my experience as a tenant. I didn't name any names, but I did link her ad. Received 7 emails thanking me, stating LL seemed really nice on the phone but they would be dodging that bullet. The house foreclosed a few months later. The last story is titled, Trespass? Okay, sure. So, a little backstory. I own a $600,000 plot of land. A few trees, but it didn't disrupt my house. The previous owner had fenced the whole area in a small metal fence. Alright, so, I have this neighbor. His land is a little small but 'tis right next to mine, so the previous owner couldn't fence it without having an argument. He told me this, so I put up signs around that area stating warning, going beyond this point is trespassing. A small river also goes nearby, which is where I fish. One day, I go fishing. As you can guess, I see this guy walking on my side of the fence, as this was pretty far away from his land, about 50 meters or so, walking his dog. I place my equipment down by the river on a rock and walk towards him. I stand in front of him, and the expression on his face was clearly pissed. He yells at me to move it. I calmly explain that he was trespassing and that I could have him fined or even arrested. He started to yell at me, and through the loud words and insults I learnt that this guy's dad is the police chief. He then scoffs at me and continued walking. His dog even chewed up my bait bag. I immediately took my fishing equipment, minus the bait, and go home. I called the cops, but they said that without proof, there was nothing they could do. This pissed me off a little. So, I did a little researching. Apparently, bears live in the forests around both mine and his property. I decided I could use this. I checked his property from the gap, and that's when I realized he had also kicked down my signs. This is where I decided to go from petty revenge to pro-revenge. I saw he didn't have any fencing. What luck. I went to town and bought some paint, metal poles and sheets, some bear traps and hire some builders. My plan took a full week to finish, but it is finally complete. Metal signs cemented into the ground, with the word, "Stay out." Bear traps laid. Painted on with a bear trap at the foot of each one. Then I lay bear traps around all of my property, but it's dense around the gap. I wait in my house for a few days before getting a phone call. It's my lawyer. He says that my neighbor filed a lawsuit, and that I should come over to discuss the plan. I do and explain everything. I even provide him the purchase receipts. When we get to court, I learn what he sued me on. This was targeting his dog and purposely injuring it, of which caught the attention of PETA, who had a representative show up. I stayed quiet, only confirming or denying statements and let my lawyer deal with everything. We won by a landslide, and I was paid $25,000. I did spend some on his dog's medical bill, but that was only $175, since it only caught its tail. Needless to say, the guy stayed clear of my property. I like the peaceful fishing again. Thanks for listening.